9 months to make a single baby? If men grew babies, it would take 2 weeks. Sounds like a skill issue.
Andrew Tate is a freaking dingleberry. Like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's an evolutionary process. Like, obviously dudes can't make babies and only women can. And it takes 9 months, dude. There's just no way around that.
What's your name?
Ashton.
Where are you from?
California.
How long have you been in New York City?
Almost 4 years.
Why are you here?
I love New York. Where else would I go?
True. So, living in New York City, how much do you spend every single month on everything?
About my credit card bill every month is about $6,000.
Is that including rent?
No,
So if you were to include rent and everything?
$8,000. Yeah,
And
closer to 8.
Okay, so how do you spend that?
Shopping, eating out, a lot of eating out. Ubers. Do you guys know how expensive Ubers are? I spend a lot of money on Ubers, going out to dinner.
And what's your job?
I'm a real estate agent.
That is a ridiculous amount of money to spend on living, but I do believe cities like New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, some of these super cities are the best cities to live in. In fact, $8,000 there sounds like a lot of money, but she's an agent. She's selling a home that's $1 million. She's able to make some cash. I obviously don't like eating out all the time, even though I have double chins, but I think it's however you decide to live is the way to decide to live. But again, I do think these super cities have so much more opportunities than just rural America.
I get happier about the harder it is because I know that no one else will follow.
It's a selection effect.
If you can shift from this is hard to no one else will be able to do this, then it flips from being this thing that you're like, oh, poor me, to oh, poor everyone else who's gonna have to fucking try.
I love that. I think many people think things are difficult, and I actually love that whole idea of things being hard. Nobody else is willing to put that energy in to build something, and I believe that sometimes you gotta be a little bit crazy, which I think entrepreneurs are. That you take that into your mind and you say, I'm gonna do the hard thing that nobody else is gonna do, and that's already gonna put me in front of everybody else. So 100% agree to that. Do the hard thing, flip that switch in your mind that it is something that you're doing that everybody else is not able to do. That's what separates you from everybody else.
3 golden rule of real estate investing. Number 1, you gotta buy right. The key is you gotta buy property where you can add value and force value so you have sweat equity right at the beginning. Number 2, you gotta buy in the right location. You wanna find a location where it has good appreciation and good high rent to cover your mortgage.
Yep, I totally agree with good location. In fact, I buy a lot of property in some of the A-class neighborhoods, and the reason why I do that is because in some pockets you can find give you an example, Central California, a property that is $450,000 and literally 2 houses over you have a house that's $1 million. So I like those value-add properties where I could buy, refurbish, and eventually get that appreciation from those properties that are literally across the street or right next door that are worth twice as much.
Number 3, you don't wanna buy on emotion. You wanna buy on number. Learn how to evaluate the deal to know what kind of deal you get. If it don't make sense, don't force it.
Totally true on that. Do not buy out of emotions. I happen to do that with one of my properties, actually 2 of them, and one of them ended up being not the greatest deal on the planet. I got too emotionally involved. In fact, I probably need to sell that property today, but I haven't done it yet. Don't get emotionally involved. All right, let's go into this dude.
I like working more than I like doing just about anything else.
My internet's lag.
And so I work with all the hours that I can until I can't work anymore. And then at that point I go into rest mode. And whatever I feel like resting with, which whether that's a day at the pool, whether that's or going to a movie, or just like a big workout morning into like brunch and hanging out with buddies, that's what I do to recharge. And I see that as active and productive because it increases my total output for the week or the month.
Alex makes me want to go work out a little bit harder and maybe get a gorilla chest because that's exactly what he's got. Secondly, I actually totally agree. Some people love working more than they like doing anything else. That's their passion, that's their into. I don't blame those people at all for doing that. I do find it difficult when you have a family and you're trying to figure stuff out and you have friends you want to spend time, a spouse, significant other. That can make it extremely difficult, but if you're both on the same page, more power to you. I think that's a definitely good answer. And some of the best people that I know that are entrepreneurs don't wake up at 5 a.m., cold plunge, read 10 books, go out and run 7 miles, work out. They don't do that at all. In fact, they wake up late. I'm not really that successful though. That's funny. I totally agree. Right now, rates are at 7%. They're gonna be dropping, and as those rates start to drop, the playing field is gonna get more difficult. That's gonna bring a flood of investors and people that are buying their first properties or second or trading up their properties that they currently live in to find more places. So that if you're out there investing right now, it's gonna get more difficult as these rates start to drop. Right now, I believe is a prime time. Yes, you're gonna pay a little bit more on the interest rate, but you can always refinance out later.
Here are some of the worst houses to buy as a long-term investment property. Here's an example of a property here that is way too nice and is also in a very expensive neighborhood. So in order to cash flow, you usually have to put down 50% or more to cash flow in a very expensive neighborhood. Here's an example of a property here that's still relatively very nice still, but it's in the area you got that's actually the price point very lower. And in these areas, the rent is also very low. So in order for it to cash flow, you're gonna need probably 35% and more. Here's another example of a property in relatively good condition and is in an average neighborhood. But you can't add no value to this because look, usually people add ADU on their land. Well, there's no more land to this property, so you can't add any more value. So this is why this deal is not a good deal either.
I totally agree. Buying the nicest house in the nicest neighborhoods, you have to put down an extreme amount of money to make that make sense. In fact, 30 to 40, 50%. It is hard to find a property that even fits the 1% rule to these days, which is why a short-term and why a mid-term rent, that's one of the ways that I'm able to cash flow faster, and to find a property that it actually will work as a long-term is super difficult right now. But I agree with that. If you're gonna buy a property, find the properties that need some work. You're able to put that work into it, get some forced value into it, and buy a property that you're eventually gonna be able to add an ADU or some sort. So get info.
I think warehouse is the future. I know guys that are killing it, like in Dallas, doing
having
just
warehouses.
straight millions of square foot of warehouse space. The reason the strip malls are dying is because everybody's getting their stuff off of Amazon. If you can get adjacent property or close property to anywhere they're building in Amazon, or somewhere where you can do the industrial park game, office warehouse space, or just storage in general for fulfillment, I do think outside of residential commercial is really good. It's an easy deal too.
I agree with that. The Amazon market is kind of like I was gonna say Subway, but it's not Subway. It's Starbucks. They do a ton of research on logistics, on certain areas and certain markets. And one of the things that I love about that is that Amazon does all these for you. Cities that are growing, different areas that have a lot of people that are coming to it. And they're usually cities that are have a lot of space where they're actually growing in the market. So I agree, commercial assets I think are awesome. There's a lot of people that are getting into that space right now, and they're getting discounts that are massive on these commercial buildings.
That if you spend 100 hours in a year, which is 18 minutes a day, all of us, in any discipline, karate, violin, piano, whatever, if you spend 18 minutes a day, which is 100 hours a year, you'll be better than 95% of the world in that discipline.
Totally agree with that. And I think so many people think they need to spend so much time putting in whatever they're into midterm rentals, real estate investing, karate, baseball. 18 minutes a day is not that big of a deal. Like less than 20 minutes a day if you just spend time focusing on one thing. I think that's a big deal. I think it's an underutilized strategy, and I totally believe if you're able to do that for 1 year consistent, you can do some pretty cool things. And you're better than 95% of the people in that specific industry or whatever it is you're doing. Top 5%, 18 minutes, get there.
Hey, I'm just gonna go and fucking ruin everything they're doing. Fuck them. Teach them a lesson that I'm in charge, not them.
That's pretty funny. I've actually had some appraisers that have appraised properties way lower than what I thought they were. And in my mind, I'm thinking that is exactly how appraisers start their day off.
This is the strategy that people employ. Yeah. They buy a property, you fix it up, you rent it out, and then you refinance it and say it's now worth 100 grand more than what you bought it for. You can get a loan for that exact amount, which you then use as a down payment on another property, rinse and repeat. Do I have that right?
So let's say the property goes from 1 to 1.1, they'll give you 70 to 80% of that. That extra $100,000, they give you $70,000 to $80,000 of that.
It's just that simple, folks.
I agree to that, but I also agree that it is not that simple. You have to find the right property. It's got to be the right place. You have to be able to add the right type of value for that property to become more expensive. And then you got to refinance out. So you got to have good credit. You got to make sure that the interest rates are in your favor. And it's not as easy as it's talked about. And the BRRRR strategy, I feel like, is going a little bit down south because it's harder to find properties that actually make sense for that. But in theory, that is correct. It is not that easy.